Hi, and welcome. You're listening to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 909A, and today's date is March 3rd, 2016, and the title of the episode is Time is Short. Get Your Affairs in Order Before the Economic Collapse. Let's get right into the economic collapse financial news. So out in Canada, we have learned that Canada sold off all of its gold reserves. According to the February data, Canada's gold reserves stood at 1.7 tons, and basically, they decided to sell it all. And Canada's gold reserves, they belong to the government of Canada and are held under the name of the Minister of Finance. The decision to sell the gold was not tied to a specific gold price. They've been selling the gold off over a long period of time in a controlled manner. And the government of Canada sold about 21,851 ounces of gold coins for the settlement in February. On February 29th, gold holdings stood at 77 ounces. And we can see right now that it's a very strange thing to do at this point in time to sell off your gold. Now, is this gold needed someplace else? It's starting to look like that. Here in the United States, we see the initial jobless claims. They are trending upward. For the second week in a row, initial jobless claims rose by 6,000 to 278,000. So we see the trend is now in an upward fashion. We see more and more layoffs. And it's getting harder for the everyday person to find work. The U.S. non-farm productivity plunged by 2.2% in the fourth quarter of 2015. This is the biggest drop since the first quarter of 2014. What we're seeing here is the entire system breaking down. Now, we have a lot more layoffs coming. Now, IBM, which we mentioned one or two reports ago, they are laying off employees. But what's very odd about this is they're refusing to release the layoff numbers. Now, one employee described the layoffs as massive. But we see other layoffs coming. Nabisco, they are getting ready to lay off a lot of people. Alcoa layoffs are expected next week. And we've been seeing a lot more companies lay off. Now, the way they're doing it this time is very slowly over a long period of time, if you noticed. During 2008, as soon as the market went down, all of a sudden we had mass layoffs. Everyone was laying off. Lehman closed down. It was a complete disaster. Now they're laying off ahead of time. This is how big this crash is going to be. And as the government continually tells us that the economy is doing well, and they continually tell us that everyone's employed, unemployment's down at 4.9%. Well, we can look through their illusionary numbers and we can see that it's a complete lie. Because if we go to the withholdings of income and employment taxes, the Treasury Department steadily slowed through the fall, bringing the annual growth rate down to just below 4%. By the start of 2016. That's when growth seemingly absolutely just collapsed to about 1.8% over the past 5+ weeks, from January 11th through February 16th. Now, Trim Tabs put an actual jobs number to this particular decline in tax withholdings. And they're saying the true pace of job growth in February was way below the consensus of 188,000. And when we look at this, they're saying that in February, the U.S. economy really only added around 55,000 to 85,000 jobs. Somewhere around 70,000, if you like to go with a round number between the two. This is the lowest number in 2 years. They've also reported that last week, the withholding tax flows versus a year ago have been stalling since the fall, and they've turned negative in February. This indicates a faltering U.S. economy. The whole system is falling apart. That's what's happening right now. And the government agencies, the central bank, they're continually keeping the illusion alive. Now, in 60 years, the U.S. economy has not suffered a 15-month continuous year-on-year drop in factory orders without being in a recession. Today, it dropped negative 1.9% year-on-year. And we can see right now, we are looking at this major collapse of the system. If we look at factory orders back between 2008 and 2009, we see factory orders dropped off to negative 30. Right now, during this year, we have dropped off to negative 15. We're halfway to where we were back in the Great Recession. And this is during an economy that the government, the central bank, is telling us we're fully recovered, that everything is fine. Again, something's wrong here. Somebody's lying. We see the U.S. services, it is following manufacturing. We see that U.S. services PMI, this is the lowest since the government shutdown in 2013, is tumbling to its lowest since August of 2010. So manufacturing PMI is declining. U.S. services PMI is declining. And the ISM employment subindex tumbled into contraction of 49.7. New orders slipped also. It's all contracting at this point. And this is what we see when an economy is falling apart and collapsing. We see everything contract. And when we look around at all the different sectors of the United States, of the economy, we see contraction everywhere. And if we broaden our scope to Canada, Australia, Europe, we see the same exact thing. And in many of those areas, it's much, much worse. So where are we headed here? Well, market, they're out there and they're signaling a stagnation of the economy, saying that the growth has completely deteriorated since last year. Well, how can this be? Obama told us that everything's fine. The economy is improving. We're okay. Well, we're far from okay. Things are getting worse. They're accelerating. And you need to think about this for a second. The government, the central banks around the world, here in the United States, are telling us that we have recovered. I mean, the Fed increased the interest rates by 25 basis points. Obama came out and said the unemployment rate is at 4.9%. So everything is absolutely fine. When we look at this data, and we look at all the other data that we've been looking at from previous reports, something doesn't jive. Something is misaligned here. So it's either what we're looking at is a hoax, it's an illusion, or what the government is telling us is a hoax or an illusion. Because right now we know the Baltic Dry Index is around 347 or so. It's extremely low. It has gone nowhere. It's creeping up a little bit, but it is awful. Manufacturing, service sector, real estate, retail, unemployment, I'm talking about the real unemployment numbers, are all contracting. Now, as we move forward throughout this year, it is completely impossible for the economy to bounce back. Because think about this for a second. How can it if the U.S. government, the central bankers have already told us we've recovered? Let's say unemployment goes down to 4% or 3.5%. Are we going to see that much of a change? Actually, when unemployment was at 7%, it came down to 6%, came down to 5%, the economy each time got worse. More stores closed. More people were laid off. More manufacturers laid off people, closed up shop. GDP dropped. Of course, they manipulate the numbers and they push things into different quarters, but overall, everything fell apart. Remember, back in 2015, they told us GDP was going to be 3.5, then 3, then 2.5, then 2. It completely fell apart. So at this point, we don't see any improvement coming. Actually, from all the data that we've been looking at, from everything that we've been looking at, we only see one thing, and that is collapse. And we can see right now, as we move forward, you need to get your affairs in order, because when we hit the summer and when we hit the fall, it's going to accelerate. There's no other way of looking at this. And there's certain signs that we can look at. Think about this for a second. Back in December of 2015, gold was at 1,050. Now, we know the central bankers have been trying to suppress gold and keep control of it, because if gold skyrockets, people are going to say, well, okay, what's going on here? Why is gold skyrocketing? Why are people putting their money into gold? And people are going to take their money out of the stock market. People are going to get rid of their dollars and go into gold. So since December of 2015 till now, gold was at 1,050. Now it's at 1,250 and change. Up $200 already. Think about that for a second. We saw that bump up of gold, and then it was suppressed again. So when we see more of this, where we see a surge in gold, and it brings it up to the next level, and then it's bumped back down, this is a signal to everyone that things are falling apart. And when you see it continually happening throughout the year, and the times that it happens are becoming closer and closer, you need to start really worrying. Right now, we can see already things are getting out of hand. And if you haven't prepared, if you haven't purchased gold, if you haven't purchased silver or anything else, or get prepared, I would start right now. The writing is on the wall. The U.S. right now, and you must have heard this before, where first we start with a currency war, then we go to a trade war. Well, the U.S. decided to impose a tariff at 265.79% on Chinese steelmakers. This is not going to end well. This is not going to work. The Department of Commerce imposed a preliminary duties on imports of cold-rolled steel used to make auto parts, appliances, and shipping containers from 7 countries, including China. They did this back, oh, that's right, in the Great Depression. We're headed down the same path. So what is China going to do at this point? What are the other countries going to do at this point? Devalue their currency? So we're going to see things basically go up in price right now. And we can see that countries around the world, central banks, they're purchasing gold. Central banks have been net buyers of gold for 8 straight years. What happened 8 years ago? The Great Recession, where everything fell apart, where they told us not to own gold or silver. Believe in the dollar. And now, since then, they have been purchasing gold. This is the longest streak since their first troops were deployed in Vietnam War. So we see a lot of countries right now purchasing gold. Central banks are purchasing gold because they are getting prepared for what is coming. And you know, as we go out throughout this year, when we see this gold price rise, and we have to remember that China is going to unleash its yuan price gold fix in April, and we see all of this is coming together at once. And then in the fall, the yuan is included in the SDR basket of reserve currencies. So a lot of this is all coming together at the same exact time. And we need to realize at this point that if gold is rising, and it's continually rising, and we see these things occur more often, and the central bankers lose control at suppressing the gold and the silver, things are going to get more expensive. We're going to see inflation. Now, let's not even talk about what's going on in the rest of the world, because all of that will affect this and bring the entire economy to its knees. So right now we are seeing signs. The writing is on the wall. And these are certain things that you should be looking at this point. We should be looking at the stock market. when we see the stock market fluctuating more and more during this year, where we're seeing a drop in the stock market by 900, 1,000 points, then they pump it back up to kind of break even, and it drops off again, and these patterns come closer and closer together, because we saw this back in 2008. We saw it during the Great Depression, right before the entire system collapses. We need to be worried. So we're looking at gold, and we're looking at the stock market, and we're looking at how prices are going to rise. Now, when we see this and we go throughout the year and these things start to occur and the pattern gets closer and closer and closer, you're running out of time. You know it's getting close. You know you better do something at this point. You better get your affairs in order. And if you haven't purchased gold or silver or purchased the supplies, this would be the time. I would do it way before this time, but these are little whispers in the air telling you, get ready. It's a sunny day today, but a storm's coming. We have many more sunny days than we do storms. Think about this for a second. So we've had our sunny days. The storm is coming, and it only takes one to wreak havoc on all those other sunny days, because no one will remember them. No one will even think about them. All you'll think about is the destruction of this storm. And that's what's coming right now. And we're seeing the signs. It's in front of our face. And it's telling us, get prepared. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.